And I welcome everyone to this community call today. So we have the topic SAP Cloud SDK community call about continuous delivery. We have Daniel Kurzynski and Florian Wilhelm, developers at SAP, who will be speaking today. And my name is Minina Chow. I will be hosting this call. I'm part of the SAP community team at SAP. And before we start, I would like to introduce you to the concept of this Zoom webinar call. So we will have Daniel and Florian presenting. Then we will have a Q&A session at the end of the call. And also we have some, I think 2 or 3 questions for you where we would like to hear from you. So a little poll that will come up. And I will let you know once Q&A is available at the end, but feel free to ask your questions already in the chat or in the Q&A bar. When you move down with your mouse, you will hopefully see a menu where you can see Q&A, and we will collect those at the end and then have some time to answer them. So for now, that's from my side, and I would like to hand over to Daniel and Florian for their presentation.
Thank you. So hello, everyone. My name is Florian. I'm here with my colleague Daniel today. As introduced, we are working on the SAP Cloud SDK, and it's my pleasure to be part of this update call today. So before we start, the typical legal disclaimer: please don't make any business decisions on any forward-looking statements we are doing today. This is purely informational. Okay, so the agenda, what will we be talking about? So we will be showing you what is new in general in the SAP Cloud SDK, what has happened in the recent weeks. We will especially dive into the Cloud SDK for continuous delivery, since this is what Daniel and I are working on. And we will have a demo specifically regarding the SAP Cloud Application Programming Model and how it integrates with SAP Cloud SDK for continuous delivery. And in the end, of course, we are happy to answer any questions that you might have and to have a discussion if there is any wish to do that. So here you can see the basic overview. SAP Cloud SDK has various components. One is the Java component, so it's essentially a Java library. There's a relatively new JavaScript library, and there's a continuous delivery toolkit. So those components are versioned independently, so you can see the versions that we recently released. And we also have links to the release blog posts, so you can get the slides afterwards and follow the links, or you can find the blog posts also via internet search. So I've picked out a few things that that are in some way highlights of the releases. Of course, for a full overview, I recommend reading the blog posts or the release notes that we also provide, where you can get the full technical details. So for Java, the biggest change is that JWT tokens are retrieved online. So that is reflects a change in the Access UAA service in SAP Cloud Platform. And what you need to know is that you should update to the latest SAP Cloud SDK version to not have your application breaking by this change in the Access UAA service. More details, technical background can be found in the release blog. For JavaScript, we have more convenient access to user and tenant information on SAP Cloud Platform. So it provides objects now, which give you quite convenient access to this information. And also we have changed or added the option to replace an entity. So that's equivalent to an HTTP put on update if you desire so. What was done in the past is HTTP patch, so to not replace it, but to change little bits and pieces in an entity, and this is still the default. So the default behavior does not change, but you now also have this new option to replace an entity fully if this is what you want. And for the continuous delivery toolkit with version 24, we have now officially added support for applications that are based on the SAP Cloud Application Programming model. So this, I mean, there has been partial support before, but it was incomplete and not official. And now it's integrated in SAP Web IDE, which Daniel will show you in a few minutes. So it's now supported out of the box, and we are quite happy with this change. And this is the main topic for this call today. Before I continue, let me hint you at TechEd. Las Vegas has already happened, but Barcelona and Bangalore are still open. So we are present at TechEd. We're at the booth. We have all kinds of deep dives and events, and so there are a lot of opportunities to learn about extensibility in the SAP ecosystem. So Daniel and me personally will also be in Barcelona. So if you also happen to attend TechEd Barcelona, then we're happy to meet you and discuss any questions or suggestions that you might have. So looking forward to that. All right, so SAP Cloud SDK for continuous delivery, or more specifically, continuous delivery. I'm now not sure what your prior experience with continuous delivery is, so I will start at a more basic level. So if you already know what I'm talking about, then please bear with me. I want to make this also easy to understand for people who are not so much in the topic. So that's why I start with some background. So I think everyone at these days has heard about the terms DevOps. I mean, it's hard to escape the term. It's used so often, and also continuous delivery. But what does it really mean? What is really the meaning behind it? And for DevOps, there are a few principles that have been identified in the literature, and that you can also where you can also show what the effects are when teams are adhering to those principles or are not. So what principles am I talking about? One principle is flow. So flow is about quick delivery of software from development to customers. So software does not really create value unless it's really used. I mean, we all create software and we usually, at least in our main job, don't do it out of pleasure, but because it's there's a business reason behind it, and software should achieve something, and it does not really achieve this if it's not used. So if a piece of software is in development for a long time, then it does not really create value. And the goal of flow is to constantly push out new bits and pieces to bring them into the hands of our users to actually deliver the value that we designed it for. Closely related is the principle of feedback. So the idea is to have really quick iterations, have really fast feedback, so that you still have the context of what you have been working on when a customer tells you, oh, this does not quite work for me. I had something different in mind. So it's really helpful. I mean, if you have like a, let's say, a traditional model where there might be 2 years between you worked on a feature and the customer uses it for the first time, then our context is gone and they complain about something, and it's all still in the middle. But quick feedback gives you the opportunity to start with like something small, something minimum viable, and then iterate on that and iterate based on customer feedback. And also continuous learning and experimentation is really important. So DevOps is about a culture where you are encouraged to learn, to experiment, and also to take informed risks. So, I mean, we are all humans, and it's natural that humans make mistakes. So it's not about being fearful of, oh, I don't want to make a mistake and everything must be perfect. I mean, of course, we want to deliver high quality, and we don't want to work in a sloppy way, but we do want to be able to experiment and to try out, does this work or does that work, and also to mitigate the issues that might occur when mistakes happen. So, for example, by automating, by stuff. So, what is automated this removes the opportunity for human error, for example, and also to have automated tests and all that. So it's about technical things, but it's also about a culture in a team or in a company. That is what we want to promote. So regarding the DevOps principle of flow, I want to get into this difference between batch style work and the flow principle. So, I mean, many of you are probably aware of this waterfall model that has been there for decades in software development. There are variations of it, but essentially it's all the same. So if you look at this graphic here, what you see here is the ideation, building, testing, and delivery of 3 features. And the idea, as it's shown here, is that it happens all in large batches. So you ideate your whole your features. So for example, I don't know, you write a specification or something, then you build it, so you actually implement it. Then there is a testing phase, and then the whole thing gets delivered. So what you can see here is that the first feature is ready after quite a long time, because we batch it all together, we do it all as a whole bunch, and the consumer has to wait a long time. And in this time, the features don't deliver any value because they are not used by users, because they are not released yet. So single piece flow is the opposite of that. So the idea is to group it together. So have the ideation, the building, the testing, and the development put together. So your first feature is out much earlier. You can see, I mean, in this graphics, of course, this is now does not show any time units or something. I mean, the idea is not necessarily that everything together works faster. I mean, it might work faster if you adopt certain practices or if you avoid waste or something like that. But the important idea is that feature 1 is ready at a much earlier point in time. Feature 2 is also available earlier, and feature 3 is available roughly at the same point in time. So features 1 and 2 can already create value, as opposed to the large batches where they are still in building and testing phase and don't deliver value. So what is continuous delivery? This might be a typical book definition. Continuous delivery is production, testing, deployment of software in short cycles and in reliable, fully automated manner. What I want to emphasize here is really the reliable, fully automated manner. I mean, of course, you can push software to production easily and from your local machine or something. But the issue there is that this is an environment that has many problems where you have then like knowledge silos where only one person is able to do this deployment. And what if that person is not available for some reason? Is the testing automated and all that? And the continuous delivery is about normalizing this whole process so that it happens kind of automatically. So that is a really important piece of it. And of course, still with high quality, having tests automated and all that. So this brings me to the SAP Cloud SDK for continuous delivery. So the SAP Cloud SDK, as some of you who already use it might be aware of, and as already mentioned, has various components. It has this Java library, it has a JavaScript library, and it has a continuous delivery component. You can see in this picture a bit how the SAP Cloud SDK relates to other parts of the SAP ecosystem. So the Cloud SDK makes it easy to communicate with SAP LOB solutions such as S4HANA. This is where we originally come from. It was originally specifically for S4HANA, but it now also serves other LOB solutions that you can see here, like SuccessFactors, for example. And the Cloud SDK makes this communication part with those systems much easier by providing abstractions. It also provides nice abstractions for SAP Cloud Platform. So the basic idea, as you can see in this diagram, is to have cloud native applications. So applications that fulfill qualities that are typical to cloud native applications on SAP Cloud Platform that integrate with existing SAP solutions. So of course, you still might want to use different frameworks. So in the Java world, Spring framework might be an example here. And of course, the SAP Cloud SDK can be used without the cloud application programming model, but also with. And this is part of the area where we want to show you today what we did. And you can see on the right-hand side in this lighter yellow is the continuous delivery, which is basically the overarching concept of how can you apply continuous delivery, which I just tried to explain in a few words. How can you explain this with low effort on your side to quickly deliver high quality applications on SAP Cloud Platform? That's what we're talking about. So continuous delivery in SAP Cloud SDK, we call it a toolkit. We discussed about this term and we think toolkit sums it up quite nicely, because what does this continuous delivery toolkit actually do? What is it? Roughly speaking, it's comprised of two components. One is a pipeline. So you might be aware of this term pipeline in software development. There are also, like in other services like Azure DevOps, they also talk about pipelines. So a pipeline is essentially a sequence of steps that is executed with each change of your application. So automatically build your application. So for example, build the Java code, compile it, build an archive. This might be a jar file, this might be a WAR file, this might be an MTA file, depending on your project type. Automatically apply tests and quality checks and all that, where we are also going to talk about what the Cloud SDK pipeline specifically has to offer you there. And then also automatically deploy it. That's really important part, to also then go the last step and also do the deployment to bring out your new features, to bring that value to the customers. And it also has an infrastructure component. So that's essentially a bunch of containers. So you might be familiar of this term containerization. The most famous example currently is Docker. It's not the only one, but it's the most famous one. And we currently also have it implemented in the form of Docker images and containers that provide you with an automated, repeatable setup of your continuous delivery environment. So you don't need to like install certain plugins or all that, but it's you just start it up and it's all handled for you automatically, as far as it's possible to do it on the infrastructure side. So how does this pipeline then look? You might be familiar with with this kind of interface. It's Blue Ocean by Jenkins, so we're based on Jenkins. And you can see here a screenshot of the pipeline. And I'm going to explain quickly what the individual things mean. So this is a pipeline that is triggered by each time you make a change to your project. So for example, on your main branch, master, it's typically called in Git. This is where we then, in the end, deploy to production, or if you have like a feature branch, what we recommend is to work in short-lived feature branches, which then, of course, in the end are not deployed to production because they are still in development. But the recommendation is really to keep those branches really short-lived. So in it is not really important. It's a technical setup phase. It's not really so much related to your project, but build is interesting because, as the name implies, it builds your project. So as I mentioned, the result of this might be a WAR file or an MTA file, for example. Of course, I mean, this then also in Java, you have the nice feature that this also checks at least that the syntax of your code is valid. So if you committed something that does not compile, of course, it fails in this stage. Local tests are then tests in our terminology that are run on Jenkins. So here you have unit tests and integration tests, both for backend and front end. And the terminology might be a bit disputed here, but from our understanding, the difference is that integration tests do actually then integrate with your upstream system, like S/4HANA, for example, but still your application is only run inside a servlet container, for example, on Jenkins. We also have linting. We have NPM dependency audit, which checks for known vulnerabilities in your NPM modules. And we have static code checks with PMD and spot bugs. Remote tests then are, on the contrary to local tests, are actually deployed to SAP Cloud Platform, so not to your productive deployment, but to a separate deployment. But here, testing, the idea is really to automate it as much as possible. So to have end-to-end tests are then tests like if a user would use your application and click through the interface, and you simulate this with something like Selenium, and then you can have those like regression tests to quickly find out if something breaks in your tests. Performance tests work similar, but we support Gatling and JMeter here for putting high load on your application and to see how it behaves in that way. Quality checks are specific to the SAP Cloud SDK pipeline because those are tests that are really specific to the use case that we're targeting. So for example, if you're integrating with an S4 system, then you definitely don't want that your application behaves badly if the internet connection faces an issue or something. So you definitely want this to be resilient. There are various tools for implementing resiliency patterns. So we used to integrate with Hystrix in the past by Netflix, which is now not maintained anymore, and we now integrate with Resilience for J, which is quite advanced tool in that part. And we also test, for example, that you only use official API. So I mean, the whole thing about this extension applications for SAP platform for SAP solutions is that you rely on official API so that your application does not break unintended when something changes in an API. But if you only rely on official API, then you can see what the differences are, and your application won't change, won't hopefully break when something changes without you noticing. We also integrate with third-party tools. Those tools you have to take care of acquiring licenses for them separately. But if you want to use tools like checkmarks, Fortify, SourceClear, or white source, so those are also additional security scanner tools that look for vulnerabilities in your code, and some of them also do like legal compliance, like are your license usage okay? Do you use some GPL licensed library or something that you probably shouldn't use in your application? So that's what you can do there. And then there's artifact deployment, which optionally, if you need this, deploys your build application artifact. And I want to stress here that we're using the build once principle. So this is the this is the artifact that was built back in the build stage. On this artifact, your tests are run, and then you can store your artifact in a Nexus, for example. So this might be required for tracing when you at some point need to figure out, oh, what version of the application was running in production at this point in time, because we need to figure out why something went wrong. And then this can be really useful. And finally, there is the production deployment. So if everything is green, then we deploy your application to the cloud platform so that it gets in the hand of the users and creates value. So we want to make adoption easy. So for SAP Cloud application programming model especially, we have integrated a template into Web IDE. Daniel will show this in a minute. So let me just tell you, the project needs to follow a certain structure. This is because when we are building a continuous delivery pipeline that has to work on projects that we don't control because you are building them, then we have to make some assumptions about the structure of your project. So how do we run tests? How do we build your application? All that stuff. And this is automatically taken care of by the template in Web IDE. So if you create your project in Web IDE from the right template, which Daniel will show you, then you have already the right structure. And you can then automatically create a Jenkins file and a pipeline configuration file. You don't have to touch the Jenkins file. It just downloads the pipeline from GitHub, which we are maintaining. And then what you need to do is to edit the configuration file, which is a declarative file, where you can declaratively configure your pipeline. So you don't need to do the programming on the pipeline side, because that is what we are doing. So especially for cloud application programming model, we have integrated testing with HDI containers, so with HANA containers on SAP Cloud Platform. So creating them, connecting is something that we do automatically for you. So you configure the right credentials in your pipeline configuration file, and then this is something that is automated that other pipelines won't provide you. So that's an additional goodie that you get. So in the project generation wizard in SAP Web IDE, take care, there is this checkbox, include support for continuous delivery. It's unfortunately not checked by default, so make sure to check that. If you already created a project and did not check this, then your project still has the right structure, but it won't have the Jenkins file and it won't have the pipeline config file. So if you need to add those files afterwards, it's also done quite easily within 2 minutes. It's only copy and pasting the 2 files, but you can save yourself the hassle by clicking this checkbox, making sure that's active. All right, with that, I'm done with my part and hand over to Daniel for the demo.
Yes, thank you very much, Florian. Now it's demo time. Yeah, so today we would like to see how to implement continuous delivery for a new project generated in the Web IDE for a new SAP Cloud Application Programming Model project, end-to-end in, I think, our remaining 15 to 20 minutes. So let's see how this works. What we are going to do is today, we generate a new project first in the Web IDE. We will have a short look into the structure. We'll also see the Jenkins file and so on and so forth. And we also will look into how to implement testing, this integration testing Florian already mentioned. And after this, we will set up our own Jenkins and run our build pipeline for this newly created project in this Jenkins. So let's get started. What I have to do is in the Web IDE, I select a new project from template, and there I select the SAP Cloud Platform business application, which corresponds to the specific project. I give it a name. So for today, maybe my cup demo. I can also give it now an MTA ID and so on and so forth. And here now is the important screen. So Florian already has shown it to you. Please make sure to tick this option here and include the support for continuous delivery in the project. And then you can press finish and it will generate a project. So basically the stick we now have chosen will not change the project structure at all, right? It will just generate a project with the normal SAP Cloud Application Programming Model structure, but it will also include the files we need in order to get started with continuous delivery. So unfortunately, something went wrong. I think we anyway have the files we need. Okay, so let's see and just continue. This is a normal MTA project. Yeah, so we can see we have an MTA YAML file. We have certain modules like a DB module for our database at the end, an SRV module for our backend services. And then we have here a new folder, which you might not know yet. It's the integration test folder, which contains our integration test. We will come to this in a minute. And you can also see we have the Jenkins file and the pipeline config YAML. So Jenkins file is just based on the concept that we are using Jenkins later on. So you have the possibility, as already said, to implement a continuous delivery pipeline in Groovy code, so pipeline as code. But as said, you don't have to implement it, but we do it for you. Yeah, so we open source a pipeline which fits to this project structure on github.com. And in this Jenkins file, we are basically just connecting to this pipeline and executing this pipeline. So you don't have to do anything. You can just choose which version of the pipeline you want to use. Of course, if it's a ready-made, centrally maintained pipeline, you somehow still have to influence certain behavior, like where to deploy, which credentials to use, to which services to connect, and so on and so forth. And for this, we have the pipeline config YAML file also in the project, where I now can specify these things like which integration tests to use and so on and so forth. So let's have a look into the integration test. So in order to run integration tests, you can just go into the corresponding file. And there you will already find an example for integration tests. Usually they should be commented out, but in this case they are commented in. I guess we had something because I tried it already before. Yeah, basically there you can already find an example how such a test can look like. The idea is it runs with a runner so-called Achillean, which will basically create a local deployment with every file, every class we need for our test case, yeah, and then we will run tests against the exposed APIs, yeah, so like it would be a web server. So for example, in the CUP project you generate, this CUP project already contains an example project, yeah, it's like a bookshop, yeah, so you have books, you have orders, and this is what you can also see here in the test case. So we have two test cases where we, for example, select all orders, yeah, and check that there's a response, and we also have a test case where we select a specific order, and we have no response. And of course, for this, the test case is working. You also have to make sure that you put into your DB module the corresponding data, which you would have to create beforehand as a CSV format. And then having this, you could now run your integration test locally, also on your local machine. If you check it out into your local workspace and run it there, you can do it by providing a connection property file in the resources, where you could, for example, say where your database, your HANA database is located, so which URL, which credentials, and so on and so forth. And then you could run it. But in the pipeline, basically, of course, you don't want to commit credentials and so on and so forth. And also, you would like to have something that every time you run your pipeline and you execute the test, you would like to have an isolated test environment. So basically, an HDI container, a database which is created on the fly, right? And this is also possible with the pipeline. So we just have to adopt the pipeline config YAML. I already prepared one beforehand, so let me just copy the values from there into the pipeline config YAML. And as you can see now, here in the stage integration test, right, we just configured that we want to create a new HDI container, and we configured which Cloud Foundry account to use, and where my HANA is already located, and then the pipeline will pick up these values and create an HDI container on the fly, connect it to my test, and then run the test. This is basically what will happen. Good. So now we have everything set up for continuous delivery and the project which should run in the pipeline. So, and in order to have it running later on in my build server, of course, I have to store the sources somewhere in a version control system like Git. So for today, I just want to create a new repository for our demo today. So let's call it my cup demo. So you can also check it out afterwards. And I have now the link. So, and now I can simply in the Web IDE say that I would like to make this a Git repository. I can specify what the remote branch should be, the remote repository. This is the one I recently created. And then I can commit all the changes. Let's call it the first version, and commit my changes to GitHub in this case. So now it's pushing the changes to github.com. I already stored my credentials for GitHub beforehand. And as you can see now, my project is now in Git on github.com. So now I have a project, I have the pipeline, I've configured the pipeline. Of course, I need something to run the pipeline, and this is Jenkins in our case. And as Florian already mentioned, we provide already Docker containers out of the box, which you can just start, and then you have your Jenkins running, which is already pre-configured and contains everything you need to get started. Of course, Docker can also still be a little bit difficult because there are many options. You also have to think of how do I do persistency, right? Because I want to store somehow the configuration of my Jenkins, and so on and so forth. And this is why we also provide some lifecycle scripts which make it easier to handle the lifecycle of your continuous delivery server. The only prerequisite you have is you need some machine. I now took on the right side. Just for my favorite virtual machine provider, I created a new virtual machine. You can use whatever you want. You just have to make sure that you install and configure Docker on it. And this is the only thing you have to do. And if you have done this, you can basically go to our SAP DevOps Docker CX Server repository, and there you will find the command in order to how to get started and set up a Jenkins server. And this is just this command here. So let me just copy it. This now initialized my current repository, right? And I have this script called CX server in my repository, and let's see just what this does. I can just execute CX server help, and as you can see, I have now multiple commands to start. For example, the continuous delivery server to get a status, to stop it, remove it, even do backups, restore backups, do updates, and so on and so forth. For today, of course, we just want to start a continuous delivery server, and so I just execute CX server start in order to start a new Jenkins. So now it will do certain stuff. For example, we see that now not only a Jenkins is started, but also a Nexus server. Why? Because we rely on Docker, and we also have the so-called minimal Jenkins, which does not come with any tools. So tools like Maven, like Java, and so on and so forth. We basically bring them into the pipeline over additional Docker images, which you can just configure. And so it's also for you very easy to change the build infrastructure just by changing the configuration and using another version of the Docker image. Of course, the downside is, not the downside, but it also means that builds are isolated, which is of course a benefit. But of course, it means also that you don't share, for example, local Maven cache and would download every time you use the CX server all the artifacts from the internet again. And this is why we start this Nexus server as so-called local Maven cache, which just will cache all dependencies you use in your project later on, which will also increase the speed of your build pipeline. So then you can see that as the second step, the Jenkins server was started. So I can just go to the Jenkins server. Now you can see Jenkins is booting. And this will now start up a Jenkins server, which contains everything I need to get started. So all the plugins, all the tools, versions, and so on and so forth. Yeah, now I have a running Jenkins, and I just need to build my project. So I will create a new job, call it my cup demo. I select multi-branch pipeline, and then I just have to specify where my version control system is located on my Git repository. Therefore, I just go back to GitHub, copy the address, and go back to Jenkins and enter it here. And because I selected the multi-branch pipeline, it will now scan the repository, identify all the branches. Currently, of course, just have the master branch, try to detect which branches contain such a Jenkins file, and then it will just start and build the Jenkins file and build your project. And this is all you have to do in order to get started with continuous delivery. And now you can see, for example, we are cloning the real pipeline from github.com in order to execute it. Of course, don't worry, first time it always it takes a little bit of time because, of course, all the caches are not filled. So we have to clone everything for the first time. And now you can see the init stage, which we already have seen before in the slides, where we would now start and prepare the project. And at the end, this I already prepared now a pipeline where you can see how this at the end should look like. We already have seen it. I would just want to share two details. So you can also scroll through the log. And you will, for example, see here these kind of things where we use Docker, right? For example, Docker image to build the MTA project. You will also see somewhere that we are, for example, using certain Maven module as Maven Docker images where you can just exchange the version. For the integration tests, for example, you can now also see that the pipeline, for example, tries here to create new HDI containers for the integration test, and then afterwards executes the integration test. And I think this is everything I wanted to say. So this is how you set up continuous delivery for a freshly generated project within, I don't know, 15 minutes. Let's go back to our presentation.
Daniel, on that screen that you just had open with a process, there was one question. So we have actually two questions in the chat. We have Daniel. So not sure if you want to handle them now.
Yeah, I mean, I just have now the additional resources, as further material will be shared afterwards.
Okay.
Blog post, and then it's already time for question and answer.
Perfect. Yeah, so there was a question, what are lint and NPM dependency audit? Please elaborate.
Okay, so linting is a general term that describes a certain type of quality check. So it, for example, checks, I mean, for common mistakes in your code. So, I mean, in C or Java, a common mistake might be that you have like an if condition and you use the single equal operator, which does not test for equality, but does an assignment. And this is a typical error in your code, which typically will still compile because as far as I can remember, it's still valid syntax, but it's typically not what you want, and it's typically an error. This is the basic concept of a linter. There are various linter tools available for different languages. For JavaScript, you might know JSLint or JSHint, something like that. In the Cloud SDK pipeline specifically, we have added a linter for SAP UI5 components. So if you use SAP UI5 in your project, you automatically get a linter that checks for best practices in your SAP UI5 code, and you can also add additional linters in there if you need to or if you want to, but that's the linter that we have there by default. That's what's happening. And I think the second question was about the NPM dependency audit. So this is a check by NPM. So NPM is the package manager for JavaScript, and it can install dependencies. And in your dependencies, I mean, of course, might always happen that they are outdated, that there are vulnerabilities that are discovered, and NPM provides a service where you can check for known vulnerabilities. So if you know, oh, you're using, I don't know, jQuery in this version and it has some known vulnerability, then the NPM dependency audit will tell you that, and the pipeline has this built in. So if you have severe security vulnerabilities in your dependencies, the pipeline will fail so that you know, oh, there's an action that I need to take, I need to update or something, or I need to get rid of this dependency or something like that. So that's automatically built into the pipeline.
Thank you very much, Florian. There's another question that was, I think, on the demo. Would I not be able to do this with Web IDE, or is CAP just an alternate way of doing it? Is that question clear to you in context to your demo, Daniel, or would you like the person maybe to speak up?
I'm not sure if I understood the
Can
question
you repeat
completely.
the question?
Yeah, so the question was, would I not be able to do this with Web IDE? It was on one part of your demo that you were showing.
I'm not really sure now about the context. Maybe it's maybe the one had the question could give some context.
Yeah, 1 second. I can unmute the person now. So Babu, if you would like to speak up real quick. If not, we can definitely follow up on this question with you. If you're not able to speak up right now to provide more context, and then I would move to the next question meanwhile that we have. So I'll wait a second. But as long as no one is speaking, I will move forward with the next question. So just keep in time. The next one is, do we need to deploy a new Jenkins environment per Web IDE project, or can the same Jenkins instance be used for multiple projects?
No, you can, of course, reuse your Jenkins. So we always recommend for all SAP Cloud SDK projects, yeah, to have a Jenkins, because the pipeline fits, and basically the Jenkins we provide brings all the requirements you need in order to get started. But of course, you can use the same Jenkins instance for all your projects you're generating in the Web IDE. So you don't have to create always a new Jenkins.
Of course, consider that you might hit resource limits at some point. So at some point, your build server might not be fast enough to build a multitude of projects. But yes, in general, for getting started, I think that's totally fine.
Okay. Then these were the questions so far that we had. Now asking again the third question, if you could provide more context around this question. Meanwhile, I would also like to launch the poll that we have, so that all attendees that are in the call can provide some answers, so we know a bit more about our audience here. And I reminded the third question again. So if there's no context that we can listen to now, let's follow up. So we have an email address that is community@sap.com, where you can raise your question on this community call if you have any further up questions, and I'm happy to shoot them over to our speakers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if that's fine.
Yeah, sure. And besides that, maybe it's also worth to mention, so we are also actively monitoring all the communities. So for example, we have a lot of blog posts, we have a lot of tutorials on the SAP community. And of course, we also have a tag, so you can also ask questions on answer.sap.com. And we are monitoring all these channels and try to come back to you as fast as possible. So you can also always approach us over using these channels.
That's perfect. Which tag is it?
It's Cloud SDK.
SAP Cloud SDK.
Oh yeah, of course.
With pleasure. Not sure.
Yeah, I think you can just search for SAP Cloud SDK and then you will find it.
Mm-hmm. I can add the link to this tag in the chat for everyone, so that if you have general questions, of course, about this topic, then feel free to ask your questions in the community.
So if I still may, I think I have now an interpretation of the question that we did not answer, and I would like to provide what my understanding of the question is and the answer. So I think that it refers to that you can in Web IDE also build and deploy your project, which is correct, which of course you can do, but which does not provide you the qualities that we mentioned. So like automatic execution of those various tests and quality checks, and also this automation. So this is what you additionally get by using Cloud SDK pipeline, as opposed to manually doing it in Web IDE, which of course you can do when you're just getting started and play around. But this whole DevOps idea, this whole continuous delivery idea is something that is an added value which you get with the SAP Cloud SDK pipeline. Maybe that was that's how I understood the question.
But since we're at the top of the hour, we have one last question that we can take maybe, and that is, can we run on NEO environment?
Yes, so also here, of course, the context is now a bit not unclear, but I think, I mean, to answer that, the SAP Cloud SDK supports both, yeah. So we started with NEO, and of course now we are mostly targeting Cloud Foundry, but I think we still support NEO.
Yes.
The same is true for the SAP Cloud SDK for continuous delivery. There at the end you can, of course, for the SAP Cloud Application Programming Model, right? This is not possible on Neo, as far as I know, because, right, all these services and creating HDI container on the fly, so there it's not possible. But with the pipeline in general, and if you don't use the SAP Cloud Application Programming Model, but just have a native Maven project, for example, you could also still deploy to Neo. But the focus is on Cloud Foundry, clearly.
All right, perfect. So we're at the top of the hour and I would like to close this call. Thank you very much, Daniel. Thank you very much, Florian, for this great presentation and demo. And we hope to hear from you soon again, also in your blog posts and questions and answers that you provide, and hope that everyone enjoyed it. Have a nice day, everyone, and thank you. The recording would be uploaded to the community call page in the community page.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Goodbye.
you.
Bye.
Bye.